We are gonna weld a pyramid with this guy. To do this, we need our pieces that we cut earlier, and we're also gonna need one of these guys. This is a filler rod. This is a piece of steel that is wrapped in copper metal in order to allow it to conduct better. And they live over here next to our door to the sculpture yard in a container. I will show you that in class if you're not sure where it is. They come straight like this. A lot of people will start out by making a bend in one side. And if you're wondering why that is, there's a couple reasons. One, it allows you to store like a hook, but more importantly, you're gonna be welding with one end and that end is gonna be hot. And sometimes when we're in the middle of something and we're not thinking, we reach for something and grab it and we grab that hot end and that does not feel super groovy. So by having this little bend in here, we know where the cool end is and we know where the hot end is. As always, we're trying to save materials when we can, so you will find some that have already been bent or they're shorter than this one over in our storage area. Feel free to use those. We want to use up what materials we can so that we can save the earth as much as possible in our sculpture class. You will also need some of these guys. These are fire bricks. They're just fire-resistant ceramic material. They're often scattered around the tables, but if you come in here and you don't see any, they live in the sculpture yard back by the very back fence. So you want to find 4 of them that are more or less the same height. And I'm going to take 3 of my lengths and I'm going to arrange them on here to create the triangle that will form the base of the pyramid. This gives me rage doing this because they're always rolling off there until you get it right. This is where letting some of your obsessiveness, if you're a more obsessive person like me, letting that go will probably be good for your mental health. This is practice more than anything. So it's your first time doing this for most of you. It's not going to be perfect. Don't stress about it too much. Do you want to come over here for a second and look down at this so that we can see what it looks like? Okay, so you'll have this arranged on here. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna show you without flame first. You can take the glasses off if you want. Is I'm gonna take my torch and I'm going to heat up this joint between these 2 metals. Usually you hold this guy, some people hold it back here by the cord, some people hold it up here. Just watch your fingers in these dials because sometimes if you're holding it right here by the dials, you'll kind of nudge one and change your gas. I like to hold it right here. You're gonna hold it at about a 45-degree angle, maybe ½ an inch to an inch above your metal. And then you are just gonna move it in kind of circular motion. The first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna heat up both halves of what you are trying to weld together. Heat up this half, heat up this half. You'll start to see them get cherry red. That's what you're looking for. We always start welding at the joint that's furthest away from us. And we do that because if I weld this one first and then I lean over the table to weld this one, that's when you get the hole in your favorite shirt because you leaned into hot metal. So I'm gonna heat this up back here. You'll see the metal get cherry red and then you will see it start to actually look kind of liquid. It'll get kind of a puddle on it. That's the point you're looking for. You're looking for that puddle. If you try to actually weld together when it's just cherry red, it's not going to stick together. It's not going to truly weld through. We want the metal to sink kind of all the way through and bond the metal completely. So it's important to make sure that you actually get that puddle. And that brings up a point that I think it's important to mention. What is it we're actually doing here? I keep mentioning the word welding. Welding means actually fusing 2 pieces of metal into one. So we want that metal to be hot enough that we penetrate our filler rod metal and the other metal together so it becomes one solid piece. It is one of our methods of fabricating in the studio. That'll be one of your vocab words. In other words, cutting, shaping, and joining metal. So again, hold this at an angle, get them both to the point where they're cherry red and have a puddle. And then from the opposite direction with a 45-degree angle, you're gonna feed this filler rod and you're gonna daub it in there. What I usually do is I hit the end of the filler rod right over my cherry red area. You'll see a drip fall off, then you can pull it away if you want to. Go back in here and fill another one if necessary. This is something I can show you, I can tell you about, but until you try it, it's really hard to get the feel for it. Gas on, 1/8 of a turn. Point that torch toward anybody. Turn it so that it's connected but straight at the bottom, feathery on the top. Slowly turn your oxygen until you see outer, middle, and inner tone. match your middle cone and inner cone. All right, you ready to do this? You guys are about to join skills together. Very, very satisfying. Okay, 45-degree angle. I'm gonna hit one end, I'm gonna hit the other end. I'm gonna try to get these simultaneously heated up. Sometimes you'll see some little sparks on the surface of the metal. What that is just some oxidation on the surface. This is rusted metal. You'll see I'm going back and forth and I'm kind of moving in little circles. The reason that we're up on the fire bricks is we never want to weld directly on the table. That's what caused these tables to be all warpy. So you'll keep the flame off the surface. Okay, getting cherry red. I'm going to hit it and watch closely until I get that liquid surface. There it is. Feed my filler rod in until a drip falls off there. You'll see some little sparks. Pull it away until I fill in whatever I want to of this gap. Okay? What else did I want to tell you about that? I'll do it again. That's probably the easiest thing. Oh, yes, that's what it is. If things get a little cattywampus and you need to bend it, you can actually grab this and change the angle while it's hot. So now we're going to repeat. I'm just going to move this out of the way. Don't forget to watch where your torch is pointing. You do not point it at your friends or your enemies or yourself. Making those little circles, getting the whole area of metal heated. Get my filler rod ready here so when I see it go liquid, getting cherry red and liquid, feed in my filler rod, feed in my filler rod, feed in my filler rod. Okay, just that simple. It's actually not just that simple. I've done this a lot. The first time you try this, it may be frustrating. Be patient with yourself. You're doing something new, it's difficult, it's gonna be a little hard the first time. It's totally okay. If your welds look a little wonky, my first weld actually looks like crap-a-doo, that's totally okay. You'll see why, because we're gonna weld more on top of them and it won't matter anyway. We're art welders, not mechanical structural welders, so we get away with creative welding. You're welcome to change the angle over to the other side to move your piece however you need to get at what you're welding. Okay, looking for that liquid shiny, and then I feed my filler rod in there. Okay, so it's all melted into one piece. Voila. Okay, now the most common injury that people get in here is they're like, hooray, I welded it, grab. Okay, this metal is hot, so you want to be careful when you move it. I'm going to grab mine from the center, and I'm just going to flip it over so that the weld I just did, the one that's really hot, is furthest away from me. And I'm going to show you how to do the next step. The reason I do that, and it won't matter so much right now because I'm demoing, is because a weld that's already hot takes less time to heat up, so you're just saving yourself time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to balance this next piece that makes the top of my pyramid on that corner. I'm going to heat all three up at once. I'll have to apply more heat down here because there's 2 lengths of rod and a little less up top. We want them all to get cherry red at the same time. And I'm going to do what's called tapping it. So my goal is to get them liquid enough that a little driplet falls off of this piece down onto the 2 below it and sort of tacks them together just long enough that I can go over and get my rod and fill it. So probably better to see it than to hear about it. So I balance it straight up and down, heating the bottom with a little more attention because there's more metal there. And then I bring it out here. So I want them all to be cherry red and eventually liquid. And then I'm going to hit this one on top until a little driplet falls. Okay, and then I'm going to pull my torch away and I'm just going to hold it in place. Do the little hand washing thing, that 2 times happy birthday or whatever you need to do to let it harden for a couple seconds. And then it's tacked on there. Now this is just tacked. It's not welded. If I tried to pick this up and swing it across the room, it would fall apart. So what I'm actually going to do is come around to the opposite side. I'll go this way so you can see a little bit. Come in from the opposite side of where I tacked, where there's a little gap here. I'm going to heat up that metal again. Need to adjust my torch after this. I don't go from the same location because I don't just want to melt my tack, and then I fill in gaps all the way around. I'm definitely less smooth welding with my offhand. Get a little on this side too. And if I have a little bump like I have in here, I can actually just use this to sculpt the metal so it's a similar thickness. Gonna tack it on there and then use the torch to shape it. Metal flows towards a hot spot, so if you have something that you want to run to a certain place, heat up the place you want it to flow to. Okay, once I've got that on there, I'm gonna turn my torch off, and then I'm just gonna grab this and I'm gonna bend it towards the center to get it kind of at the angle, about the angle I think it's gonna be. Cool so far, I hope? All right, let's do our other legs. And while we're doing that, we will talk about a few things that can go wrong. Okay, straight with the feather at the end. Cones come together. This is called a neutral flame when you have a balance of oxygen and acetylene. If you have your cones further apart like this, it's called a reducing flame or a cauterizing flame. We use this for certain other applications in the studio, like forging. If you have more oxygen and it's got that hissy feeling, it's called an oxidizing flame. We won't really use that in here. We want our neutral flame. All right, again. Turn this a little bit. Straight up and down. Heat the base first. You'll see some of that oxidation coming off there. The better you get with this, the more you want to concentrate on welding quickly and efficiently, because the longer you hold this flame on here, the more likely you are to get some oxidation on the surface, which can get in your weld and make it weaker. So don't worry about it right now, but it is a goal to be as efficient as possible. Okay, again, once they get shiny on the bottom of the top, I'm just gonna encourage that grip to fall down. Hold it for a few counts. Grab my filler rod, come from the other side. It's also good to be efficient because if things are hot, you don't have to wait so long to heat them up. And again, you don't have to rush this. If you have to stop and take a breath and come back in, you're not hurting anything. Take your time, looking for that liquid. Okay, once it's welded on, turn my torch off, bend this in towards the center. Okay, now I'm going to show you a little trick. If you're fast enough doing this and you're ready to light your torch again, you don't even have to use the striker. You just light it right off that hot weld. Oh, so cool. And one more. So even if my first weld were not the very prettiest in the world, I'm going back over and kind of reworking the other side so it all gets absorbed in there anyway. Like this was my first weld, I think it's not super pretty. Okay, I said I'd talk about some things that can go wrong. If you're welding along and you hear pop, 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 pop coming from the torch, which happens to me sometimes, it usually means you're a little too close. So just back off a little bit. If you see that split flame that looks like it's got a forked tongue, you might remember that means there's a booger in the nose of your torch handle, your torch tip. So in that case, you want to go get that blue tool, the booger picker, and you want to pick that booger, clean that booger out of there. If you can't get it, call me over and I will help you. What else tends to happen? I'm going to show you. Sometimes you, whoops, I didn't show you properly. Sometimes you have this happen. Let me just clean that up a little bit. So you're welding along, and you're like, okay, ready to weld. And this sticks, and you're like, oh my God, you know, world is ending. All that means is that you didn't get this all quite hot enough. So real easy to fix. You're just gonna hit it with a torch until that melts off, and then it's clean. If you have a little bird poop sticking on there, you can just flatten it down with a torch. Speaking of bird poop, if when you do your weld, you look at it and it doesn't look nice and smooth, it's got all kinds of little pellets on it, that means that you were not hot enough. Or if you look at it and there's a crack, it looks like there's a crack down there, a little Grand Canyon, that means your metal was not to the state where it looks liquidy. You were just red hot, so you need to get everything hotter. You can always hit the bird poop with the torch and sort of smoosh it down into the rod to make it look a little better. Okay? Bend this in. Those guys meet. Okay, so now you might see, oh no, we have a problem. One of them doesn't line up with our pyramid. So the thing that you do here is you're going to reheat this first one that we did. But you're going to reheat it in a very particular spot. You're not going to reheat it right at the weld. That stresses the weld a little bit. You're going to go just barely like a millimeter above the weld. Sometimes people, when I say above the weld, they like go up here. If you do that, you're going to get a bend. So you just want to go right above the weld until you get that cherry red. Got a little ugly spot there. A little cherry red, and then you can move your piece where it needs to go. So I want all three of these to come together. Looks pretty good. Now for our final touch on our pyramid, we're going to heat all three, and then we're just going to fill them all at once. This will take a little bit longer. Sometimes you might want to turn up the gas and the oxygen a little bit so you get a little bit hotter flame. They're getting cherry red. I'm waiting for them to get puddly, liquidy, silvery. And again, you can do one daub at a time, back up and come back in and do another daub if that's easier. If you have little gaps that you don't like aesthetically the way you look, the way they look, or the way you look together, I don't know, you can just put a daub down, reheat it, put another daub down, reheat it, and just sort of build up a little stack of pancakes. I can also hit this little pointy spot with my torch and sort of smooth it out. Okay, turn our torch off. Remember, it doesn't go on the table, it goes over here. At this point, I'm going to take my gloves off and my glasses off, and I'm going to inspect what I've done. Remember, hot, okay? Always I kind of test with the back of my hand to see if it's hot. I might keep one glove on for this, it's pretty hot still. You can take a look at your welds. What you're looking for is something that looks pretty smooth through here, like one joint of metal, like so. If you have something like this one right here, where you see a little crack, you may want to hit that again with some heat because that hasn't completely melded together. But we're going to test it out to see how good a job we did. So if you want to zoom out for me here, here's how you will test your pyramid. Wa-da-da-da. You're going to take this thing and you're going to go, whee! If it makes that nice ping sound, that's good. If it goes bonk, that probably means you have a bad weld, or if you pick it up and something's broken, that's not such a good thing. But you're all done. Woohoo, you've made your first geometric form, which will become part of your first sculpture. What you want to do at this point is we're going to have some blue tape in here. You're going to write your name on it, and you are going to write your class, which is Monday, Wednesday, 1020 to 1225, and you're going to put that blue tape on here, and then you will put it right over here on one of these shelves. When you're all done, you will make sure that you clean up your area. Any extra rods that you have, go back over in the rod storage. Your strikers, go back in the bin back here. Your bricks can stay out on the table. Make sure everything is clean. You're also going to want to take a little broom, which are located on the shelves just to the right of the door when you come in the studio, and you're going to want to sweep out the table and under the table. It is our responsibility to keep this studio clean. I'm not your mother, I don't want to clean up after you, so make sure that your area is nice and neat. Last thing you need to do is you need to turn off your tanks. So remember, this is the thing that's hard to remember, and the order is almost reversed from what you do to turn them on, but not quite. So pay close attention to what I'm going to do here. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to turn off the tanks. Which tank do you turn off first? You're going to turn off oxygen because we're on the second half of our FOOF. So oxygen, then fuel. So we turned it on with a lefty-loosey. We're going to turn it off, righty-tighty, all the way. Then the same thing for this. And I don't know if you noticed, but every time I was turning off my torch, it too was always oxygen first and then fuel. So we turn those guys off. Then we are going to do what's known as bleeding the line. Okay, this is where people get confused because they think they always go in the same order. They go back to the T-valves. You don't. You're going to bleed your line. And to do that, you just open up these handles and you'll hear some hissing and you'll see these gauges drop. You want them to drop all the way back to zero. Sometimes these are old, they're sticky, so you can just kind of tap on them like this until they're at zero. Then we're going to close our handles down again, oxygen first, then fuel because we're in the oof of our foof. Then we're going to go to our Y valves, same thing, all the way off oxygen, all the way off fuel. And then the last thing on the tanks that we're going to do is we're going to back these T valves out. It's really important to do this because if you leave these cranked in, you can end up damaging these gauges here and Brian will be an unhappy person with you. So we're going to back them off 2 to 3 turns, just enough so that they're a little wiggly in here. You don't want to back them all the way up, that screws things up too. So just 2 or 3 turns, how they're a little wiggly. Look at your gauges, make sure all your gauges still say zero. If one of these gauges pops back up, that means that there's still air trapped in your line and you need to start the process over, or call me over, I'll help you out. Last thing you're gonna do is you're gonna wind up your handle nice and neat. You come over here so you can see this. There are always 2 torches, one wraps on the bottom and one wraps up above. So do this neatly, please. We wanna look good in the eyes of ourselves and the other students in here. So you're just gonna wrap it around as smoothly as you can above the other one. Don't wrap all the way around the tank. Some people do that and that is bizarre to me. I don't know why. If you are in here outside of class time, you'll put your tank back where you found it. If you're in here during class time, you don't need to put the tank away. You just call me over and I will check to make sure that everything is safely turned off. And you're all done. Congratulations, you welded your first form. And hopefully if you've watched this video, you're ready to go for our next class. In class, if you have any questions or confusion about how to do this process, I will be here for you. You just ask me questions and I will come help you one-on-one. Cool, see you next class period.